All right, today we're going to review over solving linear equations that involve one variable. So, a linear equation means that we do not have any exponents in our equation. It is just regular numbers and regular variables throughout the entire equation. First off, we're going to add subtract in order to solve. So for example, I have the equation x plus 3 equals 10. Well, in order to solve this, simply enough, we are going to use our opposite operations. So since we're adding, in order to solve for this, well, we need to figure out what x is. In order to get x all by itself, we need to take away the number. Now, they call these numbers constants when they're not connected or attached to a variable. So this 3, we're going to take away the constant, and we're going to take away 3 from both sides. Think about this. Remember, being a balance, we need to be fair to both sides of our equation. So since we had positive 3, we take away 3. That crosses out, and we are left with x. And 10 minus 3, easy enough, is 7. We can then check our answer. We can substitute the 7 in for our x, and we know that 7 plus 3 does equal 10. So we got that right. Now, the checking part, for these kind of equations, you might say, well, that's really easy, I get it. However, when we get further along, we have more complicated equations. Getting in the habit of checking is very useful. All right, so let's move forward then. So that was addition to subtraction. We then also can have the exact same equation, except instead of x plus 3, we're going to have x minus 3. Now we're still going to use the opposite operation. So we're going to use the opposite of subtraction to get this 3 eliminated, because what we want is x by itself. So I'm going to add 3 instead to both sides because we're being fair. And we get rid of our negative 3 or our minus 3. We're left with x. And 10 plus 3 is 13. We can then check our answer. Well, substitute 13 in for our x. 13 minus 3 does in fact equal 10, so we're correct. If we have 3x equals 12, well, let's think again, what operation do we have going on here? Well, when we have 3 and tied to a variable, multiplication is in there. So we're actually doing 3 x's. So this is like x plus x plus x equals 12. Well, 3 times x is the same as adding x3, or adding x to itself 3 times. But opposite, again, using our opposites like we did before with adding and subtraction, the opposite of multiplication is division. Well, we divide by 3 because 3 divided by 3 gives us 1. And that's good because then that turns into 1x. Well, again, we have to be fair to both sides. We have to balance our equation. 12 divided by 3, what we do to one side of our equation, we must do to the other. So 12 divided by 3 gives me 4. So again, let me check. I can substitute 4 for x in my original equation. So I have 3 times 4. Does that equal 12? Yes, it does. This one is the most frustrating in my opinion. When we have a fraction. So say I have x divided by 3 and that equals 12. Well, what do? Well, I got to think, all right, x is a number. So what number can I divide by 3 that equals 12? So if I'm going to have a number and I divide it by 3, I get 12. Well, easy thing I can do is I just multiply by the number in the denominator. Because when I multiply this, the x remaining, and since I multiplied the left side by 3, I must multiply the right side by 3. Well, 12 times 3 gives me 36. So when I have division, or a fraction, which a fraction is division. Think about this. When I have my division sign, my division sign looks like a fraction, except with 2 dots. That's kind of what it means. So instead of dots, we have x over 3. So let's check again. X is 36, so 36 divided by 3 does in fact equal 12. So I checked that off, so I'm good. So we have 2 more. My next example is the distributive property. So we can remember back when we would have parentheses. Say I have 2 on the outside of my parentheses, and I have x plus 4. And let's say that equals negative 8. Let's see if this works. So whenever I have parentheses, I have to use the distribution property or distributive property. I have to distribute this 2. So what this number is telling me is I have 2 sets of what's inside my parentheses. So in other words, I have x plus 4 plus x plus 4. Well, instead of writing all this out, we can just distribute this 2. Well, remember using our arrows, we have how many x's? Well, 2 times x. We would have 2x. Now, and then we also have to distribute our 2 to this 4. So 2 times positive 4, which would be positive 8. And that all equals negative 8. All right, so now we have a multiple step equation. So that's what happens with the distributive property. Now we have to do multiple things. We have to include our addition and subtraction and our multiplication and division step. Well, first off, we always have to add or subtract first. So again, since I have a positive 8, I'm going to take away my 8. Take away 8 from the other side. So I'm left with 2x on my left side of my equation. Now I have negative 8 minus 8. Well, use your number lines if you need to, but negative 8 minus 8. I have 8 negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And 8 negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. How many total negatives do I have? I have 16 total negatives. So I have 2x equals negative 16. Well, remember again, we have 2 times x. What's opposite of multiplication? Division. So I divide by 2 to get x all by itself. I divide my negative 16 by 2 as well. 16 divided by 2 is 8. 8. Now, this is where that whole checking your answer is very important when we get to these more complex equations. So I have 2 times negative 8 plus 4, and that all should equal negative 8. Well, order of operations, -8 plus 4. I have 8 negatives, 4 positives. That turns into -4. And then I still have to multiply 2 times -4. Again, a positive times a negative gives me a negative, and 2 times 4 gives me -8. And look at that, I get -8 equals -8. +3 here, right? So we need to get rid of that 3. 3 minus 3 cancels out. We then take away 3. Now, just because we don't have a positive here doesn't mean that it's not there. That's a +3. So we just do the opposite, even though it doesn't look like an operation. So this is all canceled out. I am left with -x, and that equals 7 minus 3, which is 4. Now this is the thing, the key point I want to talk about. We cannot end a equation with a negative variable. So if you ever get a negative variable, simply enough, just flip it. Turn that into a +x. Whatever you have on for your answer, turn that to the opposite. So we would end up with x, +x, equals -4. We have 4 different things that I want to focus on, kind of as a review. We have equations where we have to add or subtract to answer. We have equations that we have to multiply or divide to answer. We have equations that we have to use the distributive property. And sometimes when we use that distributive property, we need to first add and subtract and then multiply or divide in order to solve that. And then the last thing is what to do with a negative variable. So these are the 4 things you need to understand before we can move forward in our unit. And it's important for you to have these in your notes, whether that's a Google Doc or in a notebook or your binder, for you to refer back to, whether it's a quiz or in class.